What did you most especially love about lessons with Jake Hanna?
Well, to back up just a little bit, I did get to hear some good drummers while I was coming up. I heard Ben Pollock at
Oh yeah,
Disneyland,
yeah.
and I heard Nick Fatul a lot.
Oh
He's
yeah,
still
another big
my,
favorite.
yeah, I mean, I think of him every time I sit down at a drum set. How can you not once you've
Yeah.
heard the Tool? And Fred Higuera, who's a wonderful drummer who played with Bob Scobie,
Oh yeah,
but just didn't get known too much outside California.
yeah.
But those are three guys I was thinking about, plus Wayne Jones from Chicago, the Salty Dogs and the Jim DePogny Chicago Jazz Band. He was a real mentor to me. He taught me a
Okay.
lot of the things that I still use. But then I happened to get a Soprano Summit record uh, live in Concord, and it
Mm-hmm.
had Jake on drums.
Yeah.
And from the very beginning, the touch that he had, this light, swinging touch, driving the band like crazy, but not heavy,
Yeah.
just light and lifting. There's a lilt and a bounce
You
to
ripped
it.
the roof off, just drove it.
Yes,
Yeah.
switching between sticks and brushes,
Uh-huh.
and then back to sticks,
Yeah.
or brush with the left hand and a stick on the ride cymbal, something like that. The more I'd
Mm-hmm.
listen, the more I'd hear these things. Thank goodness that was such high fidelity.
Yeah.
There was an LP that I had originally, but you could hear the drums crystal clear. And then he took the solo on Swing That Music. I still didn't know how to take a solo at that time, but hearing that, it's like, that's something I should aspire to be able to play a solo like that.
Yeah.
And I didn't get to hear him in person until, oh, 1982, I guess it was. I heard that he was going to be playing a concert in Newport Beach, and I was going to go visit my mother in Pasadena. So I thought, maybe I can combine
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
visit and go hear him. And coincidentally, I saw an ad that he was teaching at the Broken Drum Shop.
Oh,
So
that's right. I forgot he did that there.
yeah, not very long, but I called
Yeah.
him up at the Broken Drum Shop and asked him about getting a couple of lessons. So I made the trip, heard him play live with a band with Bill Berry, Tommy
Oh,
Newsom,
yeah.
Nat Pierce, Bob Mays, and Jake,
Mm-hmm.
which was pretty spectacular.
Oh, yeah.
And then I went up 2 days and took two long lessons at the Broken Drum Shop with
Yeah.
Jake. And I still use every single thing he told me when
Yeah.
I play.
Yeah.
And a couple of times it's saved a concert because I was able to reach back and think, oh yeah, that was a good suggestion Jake told me, and I did it. I remember one in particular. He told me the height I should sit at, and
Yeah.
and make my ankle relaxed and let the beater bounce off the bass drum instead of hitting like
Wow.
that. He
Yeah.
said let the gravity do the work.
Might as
So
well. You're
yeah,
working hard
exactly.
enough as it is.
I was playing with a band. It was the Dukes of Dixieland, and we were on tour, and we played, I think, the fastest Swing That Music that's ever been played. And as soon as it got kicked off, I thought, oh no, I'm not going to make it through one chorus of this.
I'm not
Then
gonna live.
remembered what Jake said, and I just tapped the bass drum, and I got all the way through it in 4/4. Never
Oh,
had to go to two.
wow.
So that money was the best money I ever spent on on
We're
those
still able
lessons.
to walk off the stand without limping.
But I got to know Jake fairly well later on, and one of the greatest things that ever happened was I had a gig with Bobby Gordon in La Jolla, but I also had gotten a call that weekend to play with Butch Thompson Trio,
Uh-huh.
and I really didn't want to lose the thing with Butch, so I asked Jake if he'd come down and play with Bobby. So I got to call Jake Hanna as a sub, and he
You
did
know,
it.
that is one thing about Jake though. If you called him and said you needed something, you'd have to be pretty low on his list of people he liked uh, for him to say no. I mean, I had to when I ran the Monterey Festival as far as hiring people. I was having an awful time with some of the scheduling, and somebody got sick. I or maybe it was Butch Miles ended up having to take a Basie gig or something like that. And so I called Jake, and I figured, you know, it's Jake. I mean, what would he do for this little tiny festival? Like he wouldn't want to do that, you know. And I called the house, and Denise answered, and I told her kind of what I was doing. And I said, should I even ask her? Is he just gonna, you know, basically tell me what to do with myself? And she goes, April, he'd never do that to you. If he's available, he'll do it. And I'm like, oh, okay. So we got on the phone. He goes, sure. What time I got to be there?
That's him.
Yeah. As long as you go to Musicians Lounge, I'll be there. Just tell me what time and I'll be there. I'll be there. And sure enough, anytime I needed anything from Jake, he'd be there. He would do it. And that's yet another, of course, it's less musical, but more personality based. But I've never seen him, speaking of musicians who are generous with time and with compliments, Jake may have rolled his eyes at something someone did at some point or another, but he was always generous with compliments when they were deserved. And he was always supportive of musicians, no matter their age, that I ever saw. I never saw him do anything remotely unkind or anything because he knew very well, just like many of the guys that I grew up with, that if you are rude or discouraging to a young person that's interested in this music, you may lose the next one that'll carry the mantle. And I think he took that very, very, very strongly. And I think you do too, because I know you mentioned you've been working with Bonu Gibson on some youth camps. And I know that's something very important to us. The Sacramento Festival has been doing it. I used to help for a while till my health got screwy. But tell us a little bit about what you're doing in New Orleans with Bonu.
Well, actually, that camp is for, say, high school to retiree age. It covers, all the ages.
Yeah.
And any of the student ensembles at any time could range from high school to 75 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so much fun to teach people about the older styles of music. And when I'm teaching a class, listening to a student ensemble, I listen to all the instruments, not just the drums. You know, if the drummer's doing a good job, I just don't say anything. I concentrate on the trombone or the piano or something like that. And being a band leader for 50 years, I know what I want to hear in a band. Mm-hmm. And probably there'll be some differences between what I tell a student band and what Dan Levinson or David Boatinghouse or Charlie Halloran will tell them. But I think we're all basically on the same page about what we want to hear in an ensemble. And some of the people are so grateful, just like you tell them some simple little common sense thing, and you can see the light bulb go on.
Yeah.
You know, like you get all if the horns, trumpet, trombone, clarinet are reading music and everybody's them like a deer in the headlights playing in unison off the page, I'll stop it and I'll say to the trumpet, you play the melody and put the accents in different places. Accent this note longer, accent this note shorter, leave this note out, and try to get them to sound like Armstrong or Oliver or Bunk Johnson or something like that. Tell the trombone to play tailgate like Kid Ory. It may not be what they aspire to, but it'll make the ensemble sound good.
Yeah.
And tell the clarinet, learn, if you know what chords you're hearing, pick one of those chords and play arpeggios off of it. Mm-hmm. Just little stuff like that. And then it sounds like a band.
Yeah.
Or banjo player says, this is a blues. Do you know how to play the blues? Yeah. Then close your music and look up and watch the hands in the rhythm section and lock in with them. Just little things like that. But the final day when all the students play their concerts in their groups, it's so rewarding to hear what they've developed over the few days that they've been at the camp. And we have private lessons. Most of the instructors, they give private lessons as well. But it's such a well-run camp, and everybody is taken such good care of. Yeah. You know, it's run by a musician, Bonu.
Yeah.
You know, she's not going to make you do something you don't want to do that she wouldn't do.
Yeah.
And it's just a joy to be involved with that.
Well, and
And
what
plus,
gets,
I get to play with all these great instructors too.
yeah.
You know,
Well, and what kind of gets me is that it's in New Orleans, downtown. So,
Yes.
I mean, how can you be a couple blocks from where Louis was playing and not be kind of, oh, this is cool, you know?
right? Well, they have other things going on with the camp too. They do a second line parade.
Oh, nice.
Everybody's got the band caps and
Yeah.
with the authentic New Orleans roll off, not the John Philip Sousa drum roll off. And
How cool.
trumpet player up at the front is leading and cueing, and so there's really no train wrecks in that
Yeah.
second line. And when COVID circumstances permit, one of the concerts the student bands play is at Preservation Hall.
Oh,
Now,
man, I
how
didn't
cool
know
is that to
No.
play in Preservation Hall?
My little girl, you know I love you, and I long for you each day. My little girl, you know I'm waiting, though you're many miles away. Just see the path down in the wildwood where we promised to be true. My little girl, you know I love you, and I'm coming home to you.
And that's another thing I really appreciate about your drumming, because we kind of touched on it before, was the fact that so many drummers are so tempted, particularly with where popular music has gone to nowadays, to try to rip the roof off with their drumming and just la 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 with everything else going on with the rest of the group. And especially as I've been listening to more and more and more of your recordings just in the last couple of weeks since I knew I was going to interview you, I am consistently overjoyed to hear just how tasty, that's probably the best word I can think of, your touch, your respect for everyone else, but at the same time, like Jake, you're driving it. You're not trying to take over the entire band. And your choices of, there's a tune on the album, Absolutely, which I mentioned to you in an email the other day, that Becky was on vocals, and your choice to basically just play rims very lightly for the first part of the tune. And I don't know if it was part of the arrangement that was written that way, or if it was part of an original recording, or it was just you and a little epiphany moment to do that. But I was just so blown away by how perfect that was for the tune, the singer, and the group. Was just that very light little rim, unassuming, but there, and just how you thought of to come up with those choices. So
Thank you. Well, I can tell you exactly where that came from.
uh-huh.
That's what George Wetling played behind Lee Wiley on How Long Has This Been Going On?
You know what's weird is I was thinking of George when I first heard you do that. Okay, that's a
one of my heroes. I've stolen all kinds of stuff from him.
well, hey man, you can only steal and build. That's all you can do in this kind of music, because you can't come out of the gate from zero. You've got to take from what came before and do your own thing. But I just thought that was just a perfect way to start that tune. That was just a
Thanks.
wonderful big thing.
It
Now, I
seemed
know
to fit with that Condon,
It
basic
is.
over Condon sound that we had with that band. With Bobby, Bobby could go into Pee Wee Russell at the drop of a hat,
Oh yeah.
and Ray Shelbred like Joe Sullivan and Jess Stacy, and I like Wetling and Dave Tuff and the Chicago players. And the three of us, the chemistry usually worked for the three of us to do that kind of thing at the same time.
Right.
And that's really not what Becky's favorite thing is. She likes a more modern approach to the music, and I don't put that down, but when she was with us, she really backdated everything she did to work with what we played. I don't think anybody ever stepped on anybody else in that band, but everybody had a slightly different idea of how things should be.
Well, and the fact, I'm glad you mentioned that Becky kind of, adjusted herself to the group, because I know that at that time that these were being recorded, a lot of people were comparing her with Maxine Sullivan, because she had deliberately, without making it obvious that she was changing her usual to be able to fit in, she was doing it in such a fashion that it reminded so many people of Lee Wiley or Maxine Sullivan, because of the way that she was interacting with all of you. And of course, like you mentioned, all of the influences that the rest of you guys had, you automatically could go, okay, here's how it should sound, because you'd heard it before.
Well, that's another thing about putting the band together. You get, in that case, Tom Rippey had suggested the personnel, but the more I thought about it, I thought, well, everybody in this band likes Eddie Condon's music, and it shouldn't be very hard to get that going. And of course, right from the first note, that's what happened. It was basically a Condon style band all the time it existed, and that made me perfectly happy.
Oh yeah, as it would anybody. I know you mentioned liner notes before too, because I started doing echoes of, well, before Echoes of Swing, I started working in radio when I was 8. Because like you, I was doing an awful lot of research. Once the bell went off on my head with Saunders when I was 6, and he was so kind and generous, and so was Wild Bill, I wanted to figure out who is Wild Bill exactly, and why does everybody like him? And, so I did a bunch of research. And then by the time I was 8, I was calling the local public radio station to correct him when he made stuff up or made a mistake. And I think to get rid of me, he invited me to the station, but then it turned out that he just would go to his car asleep and tell me to wake him up at the top of the hour mic breaks. But liner notes were so important to direct you, at least at that point in time, pre-internet, dating myself. Yeah. But liner notes were so intrinsic to being able to find out other things that either influenced the people you were listening to, or to figure out where else to listen to them at. And the only complaint I have about the digital music craze is we lose liner notes.
Yeah, I know. Lester Koenig's notes on Good Time Jazz were just invaluable.
Oh, yeah.
Because he'd write about Firehouse 5 liner notes. He'd say this tune was recorded by Mackenzie and Condon Chicagoans.
Mm-hmm.
When I was 8 years old, I'm thinking, what? Who's that?
Yeah, exactly.
And,
exactly.
Maybe another 10 years before I heard their music, but there are always references to the original recordings, whoever he was writing the notes for. And that I'd kind of store those things up for when I'd see the album. I'd say, oh, I read about this band on those liner notes. And each subsequent record purchase I'd make would lead me to something else. Like when I discovered Johnny Dodds, and I thought that was the greatest clarinet sound I'd ever heard.
Yeah.
Somewhere in the liner notes I read he influenced Frank Teschmacher.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got to hear Frank Teschmacher. I found an album with Tesh, and I said, oh yeah, okay, I hear that.
Yeah, okay, I get this. Yeah.
It's all interconnected, but it was so frustrating finding some of those things because in the late 60s and the 70s, no internet, as you said, no CDs. I couldn't just go on YouTube and hear every single thing Jimmy Noon ever recorded.
Yeah.
I'd have to find an LP that sounded like it was recorded underwater and try and make out what was being played there.
Yeah.
But
or my mother would take me to the library.
Notes pointed me the right way.
Yeah. No, I would just say my mother would take me to the library once a week, and that's where I would go to the whole, again, dating myself, the whole drawer card system and try to look things up. And she would just laugh at me like crazy because I'd walk out of the library with stacks of books, and next week I'd take them all back and get a whole other stack. But, you'd have to really want to know. And me, I always really want to know. I think that's one of the reasons why you and I would get into very long conversations in musicians' lounges.
Exactly.
Because we'd be trading stories and talking about the history that we love so much with this music. But I know that to me, if you don't listen to it, how do you really know, not to steal from somebody, but how do you really know who influenced whom and where you can play with it, how you can make it your own? That's one of the things I like about you is you do have so many influences, but you still make it your own. I can still listen to you and, that's how.
That's nice. Thank you. That's what I want. I want to have a style. Yeah. I mean, I steal from the best.
Well,
I'm
thinking of the best.
I always think about Dave Tuff, Sid Catlett, Nick Fatul, Sudie Singleton, George Wetling, and dozens more, but I try to have my own personality. It doesn't always work, but I like to combine everything into a personal style. Hope for the best.
Yeah, I know one time someone in my family and I were talking, and he goes, with a drummer, how do you even recognize the difference? And we were, he's like my brother, so I just kind of smacked him in the head, and I just went, yeah. And I played Gene Krupa, and I went, how can you not know this is this guy? And so that was probably one of the first times I realized, okay, just because I get it, not everybody can hear not everyone is designed to think and listen the same way as the musicians I grew up learning from, and me apparently. So I just need to keep my mouth shut and go, oh, that's nice. Yeah, okay, go listen to whatever it is you're listening to. I don't care.
I think there's certain drummers you can hear, especially I was lucky enough to hear them live, and they just make an instant impression, like Nick Fatul.
Yeah, yeah.
I can tell him within a couple bars on
Mhm.
any recording,
Mhm.
and I remember how he looked and how he sounded when I heard him in person. And I think I've only met one musician who was not a fan of Nick Fatul.
Really?
That's pretty amazing. And all the people I've met and worked with, just one.
You know, I feel this same way about him. Like you, I've always loved Dave Tuff, and I do remember a very late night hang in LA where you and I discussed at length Big Sid Catlett.
Oh yeah.
Because not only just his playing was so distinctive, but what he had to go through, just being with Goodman's band. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, not only the issues of replacing Krupa, how do you replace Krupa, but just the whole racial issues that were just so awful at that particular time. And he was a big guy, so people were probably
Okay.
scared of him. So I can only imagine. But did you ever meet Big Sid? I can't remember if you said you had.
He passed away 2 years before I was born.
Oh, okay.
I wish I'd met him.
Yeah.
I'd almost be willing to be older to have met him and heard him play. There's quite a bit about what he went through in Bert Crowell's book, Drumming Men.
Oh, okay.
There's a whole chapter about Sid and some of the things he put up with in the Goodman
Yeah.
Orchestra from Benny and on the road just make you sick to me, he was the greatest of all over everybody else. I can't play like him, but
Yeah.
I certainly admire every note that he ever played, you know, and I hate to think that anybody ever treated him badly.
I know. And you know, Lionel Hampton was always such just a bright, kind of easygoing, happy person. But even he mentioned that, I don't know if it was because of his relationship with Benny, that Benny just didn't throw anything up into Teddy Wilson or Lionel Hampton's face too much, because Benny did stand up for them touring the South quite a lot. And he was fine with telling promoters, I'll take your gig and have a great time with it. I won't be there if you don't let these guys go. But I do remember Hamp saying something about there was a bit of a tension between Benny and Sid. And he goes, and Sid, April, he was just a big teddy bear. And to hear Lionel Hampton say that, you're just going, oh.
I've heard that same kind of thing from so many people who met him. He was like Jake. He would do anything for you.
Yeah.
And he was just a kind and humble person, and had a terrific sense of humor, but got treated very, very badly by not just Benny Goodman, but other people as well. And it just makes me heartsick to think somebody that great, you know, I'd do anything he asked. And would you stand on your head while you listen to me drum? Sure, Sid.
Carry my whole kit. Yeah, sure. I'll carry everything. I don't care.
One thing I read about him, maybe it was in that book Drumming Man. I don't remember exactly where I saw it, but in one day he played a session with Bunk Johnson and Dizzy Gillespie.
Oh man!
And both of them loved his playing.
Yeah, I know Diz would appreciate it. I never met Bunk and didn't have any, but I had met Dizzy a few times. In fact, the first time was with Bill Berry at the Monterey Jazz Festival backstage. And oddly enough, Bill and I were discussing Jake when Dizzy walked up, because Dizzy had a lot of stuff with the youth groups in the Monterey Jazz Festival. And they just sat down and then they started talking Jake stories. And Dizzy just went on and on about how a good drummer could really just make everybody in the band sound better, because they had been talking about Jake and that Jake was one of them. And I remember just, I mean, again, I grew up with a bunch of musicians, but I had never heard anyone, especially of the caliber of Bill or Dizzy, specifically say how I heard people say how much a bad drummer could screw up a band, but I had never heard anyone just sort of just get so effusive about how an excellent drummer could just make the entire band just kind of make the cream lift up.
That's right.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, Sid's playing and Dave Tuff's playing and Jake's playing are three stylistic references that everybody
Mhm.
likes unless they're complete moldy figs.
Yeah,
And I'm kind of a moldy fig, but I'm also a drummer. So
right.
I worship those three guys, but I've played in settings way more modern than I would have chosen for myself.
Mhm.
And I've thought, what would Dave Tuff do? What would Jake do? What would Big Sid do? Every single time it works.
Yeah.
And like I played with Arturo Sandoval,
Mhm.
and I turned on those three guys,
Yeah.
and big smile.
Mhm.
He liked what I was doing, and he played extra choruses. He didn't just
Yeah.
play his one chorus and let it drop.
Because he's
And
enjoying it. He's enjoying what you're
I
doing and
was
how you're
enjoying
making
it, and
it.
I
Yeah.
know he knew what he was hearing
Yeah.
because but I've had that happen in other occasions playing with people more who have more modern bent than I do,
Mhm.
and that's no put down of
No,
them.
no.
Everybody's entitled to play whatever they want, but
Yeah.
I've always been um, happy to realize that there's certain elements of swing drumming that work outside of swing
Yes, you
in
do.
other styles of jazz, and particularly with the modern players. It's just good time playing, good rhythm, and a nice light feel.
Yeah. It's good sense and like it just lifts everybody. It encourages them and drives them.